Hey guys, Dr. Prometheus here, back with my Madden review. In this video, we're going to be using some of the Bears franchise we did before scouting, and then some of the Eagles scouting franchise. Actually, some of the franchise we did for the series. Here, we'll be going over weekly strategy, Madden menus, and the NFL, how it compares, new scenarios, the good and the bad with the momentum system, animations and gameplay, has gameplay realism improved, and the scouting update. TLDR, the game is better than Madden 21. The thing though was Madden 21, the bar was set so low that the expectation of putting some minor things back into the game that have been in previous Maddens, well, that's what I mean, the bar was set pretty low for that aspect. You had to have a huge Madden campaign online to get Madden franchise, and this is going to be more of a Madden franchise review as opposed to any of the extra mechanics like the Superstar KO mode or the storyline mode for create a player or anything like that. This is going to focus solely on Madden franchise. So let's get into it. Let's cut into the weekly strategy. It does improve realism, but there's even more issues with this system. I feel like they did a pretty good job in putting some of the stuff in there with the coaching goals. The rewards from it are a little wonky at times, but I think overall the system is a good start, but it's not exactly there. This is something that I think with our Bears franchise, we really saw going through it, really concentrating on that one or two players. Really on any NFL team, there's more than one or two players in real life that are big that you need to concentrate or focus on. But also the focus players, I do like the upgradability with that, going from 3 to 6 over time. Kind of gives you an RPG element, but the biggest thing I think with this is you want to grow more than just one player. I think a position group would probably be the best, so if you have weakness at receiver, that sort of thing. But also the stamina system in this is broken at implementation. Now they could eventually patch it, but the gameplay boost kind of go good. The fatigue system, you could have situations where you have Derrick Henry, for example, later on in the season, week 15, you just never see him on the field because the fatigue system hits him. I do like also at game time you can readjust, but readjusting for only a couple of things with a small boost, not something I expected from that system. Now the Madden menus and how the menu portion of franchise matches up with a lot of the rule changes. Now I give EA some lee room in this as some of the rule changes are done later on in the development cycle, but some I think could be implemented over the year, over the course of the live service, since Madden at this point is a live service according to EA. And how I look at this is more the menu-specific ones. So you're looking at things that are practice squad would be one thing as well, which is massive, where the practice squad has only 14 players now. So they expanded to 10, but it doesn't have the extra rules for this season, like putting a player on the practice squad, which is 16 players in the practice squad for 2021, or this season, which should be Madden 22. But there's also player protection that is allowed in there. Like this season, you can protect 4 or 5 players from getting poached off your practice squad. That's not implemented. The idea that players are cut that are higher overall, and the idea that you put younger players on the practice squad that aren't and keep them on the roster kind of breaks a little bit of the AI logic when it comes to using the practice squad mechanic It's all too often where I see a guy like, say, Thomas Graham and the Bears, who is a 6th round pick, get cut and not put on the practice squad. He gets put on the practice squad of someone else, but he gets cut in favor of signing a rookie or a veteran in free agency, when in reality they should really think about that guy as if he can be put on the practice squad directly instead of being cut and then attempting to put on the practice squad. It's kind of weird with that. Practice squad poaching does happen pretty much with injuries, but the weird thing with that is the AI will actually not put certain players on the practice squad, and it kind of goes towards overall when building their practice squad as opposed to development or anything like that. It's gotten better over the years, but that's just one issue with the menus. Some of the rules in the NFL today are not implemented in this, particularly the IR rules as well. This season, though, it is the first season, so I give EA some slack with that, and that a lot of the IR rules are new for this NFL season, so they're not going to be in Madden 22. But they could be put on the back end. Yes, it may ruin some franchises, but it could prepare you to go further. And the biggest IR things is you have short-term IR now for 4 weeks. You have the 8-week IR. You have no pup list. You have no ability to do anything. I think even you can only pull one guy off the IR still. So a lot of things are not in the menus for those. Next is the scenario generator. New scenarios and a lot of new problems. So I had one, as you can see here on this, and we played 2 postseason runs in the Bears franchise. And, well, all of our playoff games were in Chicago for the most part. And when they were in Chicago, it was a blizzard-like condition in every single game besides one of the Super Bowls, or even any Super Bowl, because those aren't going to be played in those outside conditions. But the fact that we consistently played multiple playoff games in the snow is an issue. And this is one where you played even in Green Bay. I think one was away in Green Bay, and it was a blizzard, so it was consistently a blizzard. You also have some good things with this. I like the scenarios for the press conferences, things like that. So we're trending in the right direction. However, there are some things that should have been caught in testing. And a lot of those are some of the biggest impacts in a franchise that I have ever seen in any game, any sports game. The weather is one which drastically changes the ability of how to play. In those situations, I think one of them I played the Bucks, and Tom Brady in the snow kind of took away the passing game. I played Aaron Rodgers in the snow twice, took away from the passing game. Same thing with the Seahawks, took away Russell Wilson in that passing game. And I found it to be easier for me to run in those conditions than the AI could. And that really hampered the fact that I did not feel threatened in the playoffs whatsoever in our pre-scouting franchise as the Bears. Another thing was the calling it quits in the locker room. Now this makes sense for players that may struggle or things of that nature. But as the Bears, it triggered, and this is something that a lot of people on YouTube in particular I've seen, and it forced an actual retirement from the roster. But first, the receiver challenges like this, where you have one injury, it's a 1-week injury, and you challenge the receiver, those are good. I like those. The injuries with that kind of put a dynamic in the game where a guy is out for 1 week, it's not a long-term injury, and you could have a receiver. Or you could have a long-term injury and you ask another guy to come up. The bonus goals in it for XP, I like that. That's great. So I do like how that is. But the calling it quits, we had a situation where Khalil Mack in year 1 wanted to retire. We took the one where we want you to stick on the team, and he stuck on the team, and we won the Super Bowl. In this one, I did the same thing, and he retires week 4. I think at this point, he had through 4 weeks, 5 or 6 sacks. So he had 2 games with 2 sacks. And Khalil Mack at 31 years old retires. Now this is something that could happen, but I would expect it to happen with some off-field issues, which isn't in the game, or some injury, career-ending injury, which isn't in the game, which has been in previous Maddens in other sports games. So none of those things are in here. This is just a way of saying, or a cop-out of saying, well, you have a risk of a guy, let's make it more difficult. And I don't think something like this should be even remotely in a release product at this point. Like, this is the second year of the Bears franchise. In some cases, it happened in the first year where I was prompted with this. So that's something of a confusion with that as we go to, again, the breakout system is so good. It could be better. The scenarios are good. It's a good start. Some need to be tested a lot more than anything that should have been released. One thing I would like to see with this whole scenario system is things like players asking for a trade. Hey, I'm unhappy here. We're not going to use. We're not winning. I want to be traded. Guys that demand trades. Things like that would be cool because that's something that happens every day. I mean, it's not a guy that is going to say, I'm not going to show up to play. We're not having a camp holdout or anything like that, or a holdout during the season. But I think something like that would be good and decently simple to kind of go through that, where a guy asks for a trade, it reduces his trade want on the market, because other teams know you have to trade him, and so maybe it reduces his value from there. That would be cool to see that. Also, some of the scenarios, if you do trade him, if you do storyline that, breaks immersion, where I had a situation in my Eagles franchise where we traded Lane Johnson to the Broncos, and that was after we had the retirement issue there, and that was when we continued to have storylines with Lane Johnson in a Broncos uniform. I think you've seen, if you follow Madden, you've seen some of those videos, particularly one of Khalil Mack in a different uniform talking to Matt Nagy, just like you saw in that scenario there, where Mack and Nagy are talking, and Mack is wearing a different team's uniforms. It breaks immersion. And that is one of the things, as a franchise player, some of those things in the storylines are big. So, to stop being a dead horse at this point, we will move on to the next section, because Madden scenarios need a lot of work. So here we go on to the momentum system. The good and the bad with it. Now, the momentum system creates a great difference in how teams play. Stadium advantages, things like that. Particularly Chicago is more of an AI one. But a lot of these, I feel, are sorted better for online and other online franchises, games, things like that, for online play. Me, as a guy that plays solo, offline, franchise, storyline, his own thing, I found some of these to be very tedious for the player, for me. However, does not impact the AI. One of them, in fact, we're in a rain condition, like here, I believe it is. and you have a point where as the AI, you don't see a lot of the background, so it's possible that you do see this. But we have one where the audibles will struggle to go through, or some of the route changes, and you do see that where you have to put it in a couple times. But the second one here is there's a couple of, you lose all downfield routes, so you can't see those if they're downfield by like 5 or 10 yards. There's one that is players will catch more, and say if in the experience I had with the players can catch easier was during a rain game, in a very hectic rain game where you should see more drops, things like that. The momentum actually canceled out the fact that we were playing in the rain. In a weather game that should see more drops, should see more fumbles, we actually saw the opposite from the AI, because the AI got the boost and I didn't, which actually created a situation where it was harder for the player than the AI. Now sure, on the flip side, on something like that, yes, will affect the AI as the same thing, because it's more of a rating hit, and I feel like those could be done better in coding Madden to ensure that if you have a rain game like that, a rain scenario game, instead of a random rain game like this was just a random rain game. When you have a scenario based on the rain or wet conditions in that momentum, because it is randomized between game to game, that momentum for that game should not be the hold on to the football more, less fumbles, better catching, things like that. I just feel like there's a better way to do that. For some of the other ones, I didn't feel like the AI really struggled with some of the ones I did. One of them being the receiver symbols downfield disappear. You kind of saw a little bit of that to kind of show you it was functioning, but the AI doesn't forget what button a receiver is, or hit the wrong button, or anything like that. As the player, I felt like it was more geared towards that online player base, and for me, it just made the game harder for me, but not really the AI. There's some also that would be super OP in online play. Some of them being show a hot route, or show one of the routes. I think it is mainly the hot route, which is typically your number one look, which is typically your number one receiver in a lot of plays. So with that one being revealed, there's one where I think certain play art, if you call it multiple times, which would be a good thing on that, kind of avoiding those players online that pick the same play over and over, which there's additional rules you can really do that now in Madden, and accessibility, where a player can't pick the same play multiple times, like in a row, which is cool. I played more with the X Factors. I didn't really see much of the X Factors play a big role with the momentum, unless it was more geared towards some of the more game-breaking momentums. Say one of them being holding on to the football. Maybe you had one with less fumbles or better catching, and you had a receiver that was typically up for drops. It kind of canceled that whole thing out, which, just because it's one game, makes sense, because you can role play that. Being that you had a guy, say, just was in a game where he could catch the football, but the momentum system, I felt for solo players, a lot of it was geared more towards online play. I'm not saying it's good, and not really saying it's bad, but at this point, I felt like it just made it more tedious and difficult for me as the player. On the flip side, there were good ones that I like. So, for example, the animation-based ones, say There was one based on better pass blocking, things like that. Well, that I feel is more realistic. As you're grinding through a game, you have the lead and you have the momentum. Teams kind of feed off that momentum and go through and actually push to better run blocking. That one is fantastic with that, and it really shows how a team can take over when they are in control with that. So there are some that are good, there's some that are bad. There's also one that increases kick blocks, but kick blocking wasn't a big thing. As you saw, the ones where the symbols disappear. For the AI, it just comes as EA symbols, but you already can't see the symbols of the AI in the first place, so kind of just showing you that it's there. And we have a play that the AI ran multiple times in this clip, and we will go to the animation series. But I didn't really see a lot of changes to the animation system or what would fire when it came to the momentum. So I feel like momentum is more of an added thing, and from there, that's really all I have to say on it. It is a good add, but you have to remember this momentum or something like this has already been a system in previous Maddens. We had something to this idea before with some of the rivalry games. I think it was strictly more geared towards division and rivalry. I think around Madden 12 or 13 in there, where it's also in NCAA. Remember, there was a setting that had rivalry or division games, or particularly difficult games, if they were key games to make the playoffs, make a bowl game, I think in NCAA, things like that. Those big moment plays in games, in that, the game was actually more difficult. So we've had a system like this, just not to the point where you have certain things difficult. And I actually like the fact that the games that matter more should be more difficult. We're going to go on to the meat and potatoes, though, of Madden. And that's the gameplay. So, are the animations better or worse? My opinion on animation gameplay is that it is game-breaking in some aspects. In some aspects, it's cool to see an animation play out. Player gets particularly mossed, things like that. You see a cool catch. Those animations are cool, but what I find is the issue on the day-to-day day-to-day actions in a game for a player. You have situations like this. This is Cole Kmet attempting to catch a pass. We throw it into coverage, so it's already a dangerous pass. But at this point, the ball is going towards Cole Kmet's hand, and we'll kind of go through what happened in this particular play, but this has happened multiple times. And instead of it going to Cole Kmet's hands, which is trending down to his waist, the ball goes into Alexander's hands, which is subsequently through Cole Kmet's head. These are the animations that really break immersion and are still in Madden after a couple of years. This becomes frustrating, and in the animation gameplay is one of the more frustrating things in Madden. So here's one example here, playing the Jaguars. It is the Super Bowl here. Fields with its S factor, kind of messing around. And we throw it deep, and it's a dead-eye bullet pass, and the animations like that are great. Allen Robinson out there, beating the route. And it's a smooth play. Not a lot of animations fired. There's no animation interaction. It's really just one player throwing the ball, the other player catches it. No other animations colliding and things like that. Now, you have a different situation where Fields is here, and we're going to throw to Daz Newsome. Now, his bullet pass is there, And again, we see more issues with players going across the face of the defense and just outrunning the defense. That's another issue entirely, but this is a point where no animations really connect. It's smooth gameplay besides the route being the fact that it's not really guarded, and that's besides the point. But that's what happens when you have an animation not around another animation. Most of the time though, you're going to have a situation where you actually have some good animations between two players. Like this one in particular, Roquan Smith guarding the guy. Everyone does not look towards the line of scrimmage. Real life, the animations are nice. But if you know anything about football in this, Roquan Smith is not going to run this route. He is going to look downfield. He looks at the RPO. He's going to come off the line. And right here, there's no awareness. He does come off the route. But he comes off the route almost 10 yards downfield. You still have a guy down at the bottom of your screen, the Buccaneer, that's guarded by 37. And he's still running downfield. He doesn't attempt to block. No one attempts to block. This is all pass, route running, animation firing on an RPO. So it's not like you have an animation where these guys are trying to block. All of the receivers and DBs are going out on routes on this RPO. Sure, it's maybe an RPO in that, but that's how Madden looks there. Now you have another situation on a non-RPO where two close interactions are going to occur. It's out to Cole Kmet, and it already looks funky at full speed. It looks funky. And we'll look at this one more in depth in the replay. Now, you have decent blocking, but the line is jacked up and it's blocking, and that's something that's not going to change. So we're going to look at the interaction here. This is two unconnected different animations firing at the same time. I would expect if you have animation gameplay here that there should be some interaction between Davis and Cole Kmet here. In this instant, you have, again, this has been in Madden for multiple years, two separate animations, and one has to win the ball because the animation is connected to the ball. So you have a situation where two animations are within themselves, within their own box, interacting, but it's not together. And what I mean by interacting is Davis, in any real, actual sim football game with momentum and other physics-based here, he hits Cole Kmet, and he is there before Kmet can actually make a play on the ball. This would be a questionable PI call. It could go either way. But really in this, no one should catch this football. But as you see here, Davis is in a diving animation, and Cole Kmet is in a backward falling animation. These animations do not touch, and this is just one of the many animations that you see where you have some that fire away from the ball. You have some that'll fire when you throw the ball downfield. You have some that don't fire at all, whether it be on offense or defense, where a player doesn't jump up, or a player doesn't go for the ball, or he runs a couple yards past the ball while a defender makes a play on the ball. This is in the game all over the place. So you might say maybe that's just one. We have another situation with Green Bay. Fields a little play action, and here is the one you see in the thumbnail. Now, the ball literally is going for Cole Kmet's hands. See here, dangerous play though, either way. And you see the ball teleport. It's going for Cole Kmet's hands. It's looking. We'll go forward. And whoop. To Alexander's hands. There's no actual physical change there. You don't see this stuff in games like MLB The Show where the ball maybe moves a couple inches in the animation to someone's glove that was already in. But you don't see half a body movements like this. Rarely do you see it in games of the quality of The Show. And we have yet another one. Fields with his X Factor on, looking. Two guys downfield, and you have a dead-eye bullet pass. That is not there. Can't overthrow that ball. We have another situation, and you might think, well, me as the player, I'm causing this. We have another situation with the AI. And that is an offensive tackle catching the ball because the animation for tight ends and tackles are the same. So going into this, how realistic is Madden? We're going to compare what is on a Sunday game that was recently with Darnell Mooney and Justin Fields. And we're going to compare it to Madden. Look at the red boxes here. There's going to be something to pay attention to after we see the video. But here we go with Fields. He's going to take it, and he is going to throw that in the corner of the end zone. Sorry, the quality is not that great because it is from a live stream. But as you can see here, it's thrown connected to the route. It's not thrown into space for control. Like, look at all the space to the right side of Darnell Mooney. This is where this ball would be in real life. Fields would throw that into space. However, in Madden, you as the quarterback can only throw it around the area of the route itself. So there's no way to throw into space like this. And I see it's a consistent issue, and I'll show you what it means on realism. Now this is Justin Fields in the Lions game, week 3. He throws it on the outside. Darnell Mooney goes out to the line. The ball is thrown to the line, and Mooney runs under the football. That is thrown into space. Mooney's route doesn't take him there, but it's thrown into space. What does that visualize in? Well, the 3 to 4 yards that you see on Sunday in realism, it's thrown into space. In Madden, the space in this particular play would be the yellow box towards the sideline. The issue is you can only put it where it's connected to the route, and I think it breaks realism completely. And it's something that really devolves from my idea of simulation football, and the point that I play Madden to recreate those great plays on Sunday, those plays that I want to see, and Madden just could not give me those plays. Whatever I do, I am hamstrung by the mechanics of the game, and maybe the system before the other Maddens was good, but the touch pass system, the throw over, throw under, that whole system just doesn't work because you're hamstrung into what the route is, where the route is, and you don't always consistently are able to throw it into space. If I could, I would probably do more overthrows because that's what you typically see on Sunday. More quarterbacks will overthrow the football than underthrow it when it comes to a big play like that one in that Lions clip. But in that aspect, I think EA needs to revamp how the game is structured in that. So on to the scouting update. Here we go with scouting is trending towards realism, but it just lacks simple logic in some aspects. So to kind of go through the scouting update, if you haven't already seen it, the update allows you to have your 5 scouts, 3 at tier 1, 1 at tier 2, and 1 at tier 3, which I'm not sure if your regional scout has to be a tier 3 or if you can change it. But the idea with this is to break down the scouting by region and have you make choices towards positions, towards regions, things like that. I found it to be a good start. However, there's weird things where if I have a quarterback in the Northeast and I am scouting him and he looks good, everyone's concentrating on him, and there's no way I can get that 1 or 2 overall pick. I got pick 8. I see a quarterback in the Central. Looks like he's going to be around middle of the rounds. He's going to be there at pick 8. After I've set my scouting and my quarterback scout is in the Northeast, I cannot change him to scout the Central because he's stuck in the Northeast. I think that is an oversight. Might be a bug. But the fact that I should be able to freely move around my scouts around the country during the season while the college season is going on just seems like something that's logical. But however, it's not in the game. Once you pick where your region is around, I think week 5 or 6, that's where they're at. That's the end of it. And then you have your national scouting. And so really the idea is if there's players all over the place, you can't really scout many of them. And I think that's EA's way of limiting how OP the system is. But I should be able to dynamically change where my scouts are at that. It's still going to make sure that I'm not going to be able to scout every player to that, but I should be able to focus a position that has a focus like that quarterback and kind of go back and do that whole thing. As for the mock drafts, I love the mock drafts. Great addition. Gives you an idea where someone could go. However, I found that the draft picks section is gone on the left side. So when you're in other menus, you can't see what draft picks you have. So you have to go in the mock draft and you see everyone's current. But the draft stories aren't in the left side. So I don't know who has a draft story, who's trending up, who's trending down, who had a great combine, who didn't go to the combine, that sort of thing. I got to go in and out of menus constantly. And I felt like I was spending more time going in and out of menus. The other thing that frustrated me is the focus players. Now you do this at week 11 and you think about, I want to go look at a player at, I don't know, at Toledo. Chris Carmichael. Let's look at Chris Carmichael at Toledo. Or Mike Davis at Georgia. And I go to look at these players, or Graham Bryant at USC. USC is not a small school. There are other players at USC. But for some reason, I can only look at that one player. In that particular draft, there were 2 corners out of Utah. I can only look at one. Even though, realistically, my scout is attending a game with both of them there. The easiest way to kind of sort that out would be how an NFL head coach does it, in which you scout colleges and then it tells you how many players in the draft are in that college. That would be the simplest way to do that, and I think that would be good, and I think that should be done by region. Let's break it down even further. You got your 5 scouts. You can attend 4 games. Or 4 schools. We'll make it even more basic. 4 schools. Those 4 scouts have to go to a school in their region. And then your national scout can go to any school in the country. So you get 1 to scout anywhere, and you get 5 to scout, or 4 to scout regionally. I think that would be a fantastic idea and a good change to that. I think that was an oversight, and likely because they didn't have enough time, I would say that probably wasn't even thought of. It probably would have been a lot easier to implement, in the idea that if you had time, but this just takes the draft board, you just pick 3 players and that's it. Like, I think hopefully EA does take some feedback in the community. I know my voice isn't that loud, but it's far from being loud. But I think we have some potential here where we can expand. And it kind of goes into free agency as well. That's why I merged kind of scouting and free agency into one here. Because free agency and the draft and college kind of go hand in hand. You're looking for players that you want to sign that are holes that you can't fill in the draft, obviously. Or you want depth because you're targeting a player in the draft. Depth-wise would be, or you never thought you would get a player like that. I.e. Chicago with Justin Fields. Takes Andy Dalton and Fields falls and they trade up to get him. That's something that's not, that wasn't expected, but it happened. In this aspect, in free agency, I feel like I have all this time in the world that I can actually make my draft completely filled with free agency, or I just have so much time that I can easily look at the draft board, at this, at that, at my team, and go back. There's no risk here. This is what I'm trying to say. There is no risk in this system. It's the same system from Madden 21, which is the same system from Madden 20, which I believe is also the same system from Madden 19. It's also the same thing that MLB The Show does. And it's the most disappointing point of a lot of sports games because I want that risk. I want that reward. I want that payoff. And this is more sorted towards a online franchise. And for those online players, I think this system should be here. But to caveat that, since this has been copy and pasted for the last 3 or 4 years, my opinion is it should be easy to implement. So my idea would be, in this aspect, in review, would be Madden needs to come up with a better system for franchise for non-offline players. Obviously, that's not going to be something they do, but I think having that risk reward, a lot of people would be better off with that. I think with a bid system, and referring back to, again, Madden 14, I think it was, and having those bid system like that, or maybe even kind of like NFL head coach, one of those things where in that aspect, it was one of the great games that allowed you to do a lot of things with contracts. And that's my next thing. contracts are so bare bones in this that if you have cap issues, which is something that did occur in the Eagles live stream, if you didn't see, that eventually I had cap issues going from the draft into, or from the offseason into the draft. In that aspect, I would be able, and I had to role play this, I would be able to do an extension, lower someone's contract, add a couple years on, increase their salary, but decrease the cap impact. This is something teams do all the time, every year, and it's simply not in Madden. I have to go through, edit the player, role play that type of thing, but there is no actual way to do this. There's no system that adds that. We don't even have front-loaded and back-loaded contracts in Madden. This is something that should be basic, which is just a simple slider of putting 20% more on the back end or 20% more, and I'm using 20% as arbitrary, but 20% more on the front end or 20% on the back end. It's simple coding math. But that simple stuff is not in Madden. A lot of things that I would expect for a realism football game that is now a live service lacks. It's a shame, to be honest with you. It's surely a shame. So I'm going to wrap this video up here. A long, deep dive, 45 minutes or so on my review. TLDR, the game is better, but it's not what I expect. It is not what I expect from a massive company like EA that makes Battlefield, all these other massive games, and I just expect better from that standpoint. Now, I'm not going to go into all the stuff with what's it online or anything. These are just my opinions on the game, what I think about the game at this point. And I kind of told myself it wouldn't be overly negative because we're heading in the right direction. But that doesn't mean you can't be critical of a game that you want to be good, but it's just not there. So, to wrap this up, thanks for hanging out, guys. Go check out some of the content on the channel, some of the other reviews. We also have some other games besides Madden on the channel, but if sports games are your thing, we have MLB The Show on here and Madden content that we do have an offline and a stream franchise that we play on primetime days. But thanks for hanging out, and I will see you in the next one. Later, guys.